This is the Huawei P30 Pro. When it came out, we crowned its camera the best on any phone. But that was over 6 months ago. Now, Apple has a new suite of iPhones. So does that mean there's a new camera king? First up, let's talk about the star feature in the new iPhone 11 phones, the ultra-wide-angle lens. It's super nifty if you're in a tight spot, if you're trying to capture a vista, or if you're just feeling creative. The problem is, Huawei has been putting ultra-wide-angle lenses in its flagship phones for about a year now. And it still has the features edge, thanks to a periscope lens that lets it take 5 times optical, 10 times hybrid, and 50 times digital zoom photos. The iPhone 11 Pro phones, on the other hand, both have a telephoto lens that let it take 2 times optical zoom and 10 times digital. The regular iPhone 11 doesn't have that lens, so there's no optical zoom. And as we'll see, that's a win for the P30 Pro. But unfortunately for Huawei, that's about where their wins end here. Quick note before we start comparing shots. I used the Pro Max, the most expensive of all the new iPhones. But the only difference between this and a regular iPhone 11 is the telephoto lens, which means the only difference you'll notice when comparing photos between the two is when you're zooming in. In other words, most of the photos I took on the Pro Max could be replicated identically on the iPhone 11. The basic story of the two phones is this. The iPhone tries to recreate real life, the Huawei tries to improve real life. It does this mostly by playing around with image sharpness and color saturation, and it tries to create more vivid pictures. Take a look at these food shots, for example. The granola shot by the P30 Pro looks great, but compared to the iPhone, it looks like it's already been put through an Instagram filter. In regular settings, the iPhone is fantastic at rendering true-to-life scenes. The P30 Pro in general is also very good. However, sometimes its software can misfire. Here, for instance, the saturation is off, and on the whole, it looks overprocessed. The P30 Pro can also be inconsistent when it comes to white balance. It often shoots photos with an unnatural cool tint. This is especially apparent where you compare it side by side with an iPhone. This carries over to the portrait mode, where the iPhone generally has warmer tones and richer colors. Huawei's processing also extends to skin smoothing, which makes the portraits look even less natural. So that's the basics. Now let's get to the new stuff. Both phones have great ultra-wide-angle cameras, but the iPhone's is slightly better. When it comes to exposure, the iPhone's ultra-wide lens is more balanced. In high contrast situations, the P30 Pro tends to struggle. Here, you'll see only overblown highlights where the sky is meant to be, whereas the iPhone managed to capture a lot more information. I really liked this photo when I took it on the P30 Pro, but then I compared it to the iPhone. In comparison, the Huawei's colors look a bit dull, and it's apparent that some over-sharpening is at play. To be fair, sometimes Huawei's software processing actually works in its favor. Here you'll see Huawei gets more detail in the mattes and on the carpet, and also a more accurate white balance. I've cherry-picked these photos because they show the greatest difference between the two phones. But on the whole, in most settings, both phones shot comparable ultra-wide images. Where the Huawei is still way ahead though, is zoom. I still prefer the Pro Max over the P30 Pro for photos taken at 2 times magnification. Anything beyond that though, and Huawei is the undeniable winner. These photos were taken at 5 times zoom. As you can see, the P30 Pro captures far more detail and is more color accurate. Huawei deserves a tip of the hat here. 2018's P20 Pro was the first phone with a night mode, which uses software to brighten up images taken in low light conditions. I'm conflicted here. Huawei's default photos go through a lot of image processing, and as a result, standard photos taken in low light conditions are already pretty good. As a result, in some cases, night mode is overkill, adding in too much light and making a photo look artificial. This low light shot captures an impressive amount of light because night mode isn't even turned on. However, you'll notice a lot of artifacting and digital noise. Turning night mode on will drastically improve this, but not eliminate it completely. These photos are much more evenly matched, and both phones did a great job. However, look closely at the P30 Pro, and you'll see a niggling green tint. Meanwhile, the iPhone's default low-light photos pale in comparison to the P30 Pro's, but its night mode photos are more true to life. The iPhone 11's night mode is more realistic, but since we're talking about a feature that's designed to artificially add more light into a scene, you could argue that Huawei does a more thorough job. It's a little subjective, but I give the nod to the iPhone 11, only because its photos are more true to life. Despite that, many people I've shown these photos to actually prefer the P30s. But again, a lot of that can be chalked up to the filtering that Huawei does on its photos. But that filtering has a downside. It often not only reduces the accuracy of photos, but also the detail. Photos taken on the P30 Pro do tend to pop, but often, the more you look at them, the more you notice issues. If we're talking about which phone takes photos you'll like more, it's up to taste. If we're talking about which phone takes better photos, the iPhone 11 Pro Max is the winner. For the full written comparison, check back to CNET.com.